according to my caption, I am a librarian by trade, but a knitter by heart. I am probably just going to chat to you a little bit about what I'm working on right now. So this is something that I started 3 years ago, around about when I first started this YouTube channel, social media business. And this is the Yell cardigan. You'll see that I have worked quite a bit on it. Yeah, so this is the Yell cardigan by Wallin. I am knitting it in BC Garn Bioshetland. I'll include the color breakdown in the description below, primarily because I do not remember what I used off the top of my head. It's also, I'm not gonna lie, gonna be a bit of a mission trying to remember, because for the body I really only need the dark brown and the white, which I have, but I have it mixed up in my stash, and it's because I rolled it up into balls, it is going to be one hell of a mission trying to find the relevant colors when I need to pick them up again. But that is a problem for a later date. The deal with the Yale cardigan is that it is a oversized color work garment that is worked in the round, and then you steek it. I have never had the pleasure of steeking anything before, and so I very much I don't feel worried about it so much. The idea with steeking is because color work can be a little bit it's not, I don't love knitting in the flat with it, and I understand most people don't. So with something like a cardigan, which needs to be split open at the front, you knit the whole thing in the round, but then you also have a series of stitches, and I'll be cutting down the middle of this. I understand that for yarns like Shetland wool, it is scratchy, like it clings together enough that you don't need to reinforce the sides, and because the nature of knitting is that it wants to unravel horizontally, not vertically, I understand that that makes it possible to cut open a garment without it unraveling. I am definitely going to be running a sewing machine up and down the sides. I'm not quite brave enough to do it without reinforcement, but I'll be cutting through the middle stitch over here, and in order to make sure that it doesn't unravel, and for my security of mind, I will be using a sewing machine down here and here, all the way straight down, just to make sure that it doesn't unravel. I started this project because of The Gentle Knitter, who is a knitting podcast that I very much love, and who inspired me to start my own knitting channel. I can't quite remember from whom, but I learned that for steeking stitches, so you'll see for the majority of the garment I did like knit stitches all across, but I learned later on that it's very helpful to have only the middle stitch done in the knit stitch, so you know exactly what stitch you're going to be cutting into. So you'll see for the more recent ones, I switched to purl, so these are all purl apart from the knit. And the knit is what I'll be cutting into, and then purls over here. Forgive me, and also, with the Yell cardigan, the front, there'll be one cut down the middle, to make the cardigan opening, and the sleeves are also steeked as well. So I'm pretty much just knitting, like, how does one describe this? Another steek stripe up here. And so it's just to joint a garment. If I were to wear it after completion without steeking, I'd just be wearing like a rectangle potato sack with my head sticking out. But I'll be cutting open just for the armholes and the front, and then I'll be picking up along the steeked arms to make the arm pattern. Just show you what the garment itself looks like. So this is a very beautiful cardigan from Wallin. The only thing that, because I started this about 3 years ago, and I remember at the time I put it down and I considered unraveling it, which is insane because it's a lot of work that I've put into this. I considered unraveling it because it was a detail that was bothering me very much as I was working on it. Specifically, the cardigan calls for a moss stitch beginning. Wonder if I can show you actually. So you'll see at the very bottom, it asks for a moss stitch like him. And I remember someone was saying that they found that the moss stitch as it is would curl up if you just had the single layer. And so I thought at the time, I was like, well, I believe if I knit it to double the length and I fold it in half and I knit it together, it'll create a like a doubled over moss stitch hem, which I didn't believe would roll up. I'm pretty sure the idea would have worked very well, but unfortunately I did not take care to match up the moss stitches from the cast on to the stitch where I would begin knitting the body proper. And so it does warp at the edge. I mean, you can see it there. So there's a particularly good example of what I disliked. And then I took more care towards the end when I saw what was happening. So there's parts that are very straight and very well put together, but then unfortunately there are also parts that I very much look at every time, and every time I look at it I think, oh, I wish I'd done that better, or I wish I'd done that differently. I think because I kept looking at it like so, and because I kept focusing on this one aspect that isn't massive in the grand scheme of things, I just grew more and more discouraged, and then I ended up putting it down because I couldn't quite bear the thought of frogging it, so I just didn't think about it for a bit. I picked it up recently, and then I had a look at it, and I was just like, it's not so bad. It's not so visible. I feel if I were looking at this garment, the hem, I truly feel I wouldn't notice that at all. Or if I did, I would think like, that's all right. That's not that noticeable. It's a handmade garment. It's a part of the charm and the beauty of a handmade garment. There are also notably small mistakes in colorwork. In the colorwork, I am much more forgiving of myself about mistakes in colorwork now. Just because I've never done a colorwork piece where I've not had a mistake in it. Like even this cardigan that I'm wearing, this sweater that I'm wearing right now, which is the Darling sweater, you'll see over here, I knit it horizontally across, and I actually just use that as a like a point. Like use that to gauge what the front of the sweater is. So I put the sweater on the right way around. But I remember when I was first working on it, I'd keep looking at the mistakes as they happened, and I focused on it, and I just remember I was like, I don't want to work on this anymore. Truly, I believe you can see the mistakes in the color work, but it's not as glaring or obvious or as bad as I remember it being. So you'll see over here, and like over here, for example. Yeah, I look at it now and I just see the beauty of the overall garment. It is a fingering weight garment knit on 3.25 millimeter needles. I think that's US 3 for people who use that system. So it is a garment that is going to take quite a lot of investment, quite a lot of time, and I really love colorwork. This is the kind of colorwork that I love the most. Forgive me, I'll just take a second to show the other side as well. I can't see over it. Yeah. I love doing this kind of color work. I believe I've spoken on this before, but one of the particular joys I find with color work is that um, it is somewhat easy to memorize because you just have to think of the next stitch to complete drawing the picture that you're trying to draw. And you can, as you knit and go through and create this design, you can see this very beautiful work coming to be under your fingers. And for me, there's also a very particular joy in this piece because, like, the total number of stitches in the round is quite a lot. I don't remember because it was 3 years ago when I cast it on, but it is quite a lot of stitches. And it's you pretty much only have to knit one repeat of the pattern looking at the written chart, and then because you have to repeat that same 22 stitches so much throughout the round, it's very easy to knit while doing other things. So for example, I'll knit the first 22 stitches in the round, and then I don't have to look at the paper pattern again. I can just copy what I did before, and that makes it really great for meetings. I've not had a chance to knit it in a meeting, just because I've been working through the Petal drop socks, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I've been knitting on it during the we just had a long weekend. Through that long weekend, I knit on it with audiobooks, and it's just reminded me of how much I love knitting this piece when I wasn't focusing so much on the mistakes of it. Yeah. I have the armhole steak, I think is about 20 something centimeters high, and I'd say I'm about 75% through that right now, and then I will be beginning to bind off for the body proper. There's no shaping in this garment whatsoever. It's pretty much like a rectangle that you cut down. I like that aspect because I really enjoy oversized dark garments. But as I knit the armhole steak, I remember I am still thinking like, oh, this is longer than I thought it would be. I myself am quite a short person, so I find that anything that is not quite working with my proportions makes me look even shorter. But because it's a bottom up cardigan, and because I don't know enough about the garment to feel confident in modifying things, especially because of how long, like if I made a mistake now, I would be making a mistake and possibly ruining literally 100 hours of work. So I'm gonna follow the pattern faithfully into the dot, but I suspect that by the time I finish knitting this cardigan, I think it'll be either at hip length for me or perhaps a little bit lower. And just for context, I am around 5 feet tall. I'm 150 centimeters ish, give or take. I understand that, fun fact, I'm about the same height as Sabrina Carpenter, which is always a little fun fact for me. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how long it ends up being. Yeah. I'm enjoying doing the body very much, but with the sleeve, there's pretty much an entire charted pattern for the sleeve, and it doesn't look like something that I can, because the decreases keep happening, and I believe I may need to keep an eye on the chart to keep an eye on the decreases. So I think I will relish doing the body for as long as I can, and then I'll work up the courage to steek something. I'm, I'm, I say work up the courage. I have faith, just because I've seen so many other people steek before. I trust that it's a technique that will see me through. Yeah. Um, So yeah, I'm almost looking forward to the part of stealing the pattern, if I'm honest. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what this garment is when I can put it on like I envisage putting it on right now. And because staking is a technique that I've never done before, I'm looking forward to doing it. Yeah. And the petal drop socks have been possibly the pattern that I've knit the most ever. I even spoke about it in my last video, but I finished the last pair that I was working on when I last spoke to you, and I cast on another pair immediately afterwards. But just for your reference, these are the petal drop socks that I finished most recently. They are knit in the West Yorkshire Spinners' signature 4-ply in the colour Milk Bottle. And you'll just see that there's a really lovely cable pattern that it looks harder than it is. It is deceptively easy to do. It's easy to memorize. It's a beginner-friendly pattern, and it's simple enough to memorize so that you can keep doing it and you don't have to look back on the pattern like so consistently. You can just knit from your memory of it. But because it's not plain stocking knit, it remains interesting enough for me to keep making it. And considering that for a sock you have to knit 2 of them, I have now completed 6. I've made 3 pairs of these, and for this one I did Kitchener the toes. Yeah, it's bottom down sock. Yeah, and I knit the smallest size. There we go, and that's just what the heel looks like. I'll include I have a photo comparison of what a worn pair of socks and a completely new pair of socks look like, knitted in the same yarn. It's interesting because the color itself has changed quite a bit, and I don't know. To be quite honest, I think it's because I just don't take much care in separating my socks and the colors before I chuck them in the wash. Yeah. I cast on another pair, so my 4th pair, immediately after having finished those ones. I keep them in this little bag which fits socks. I enjoy knitting because they're so portable, and I knit. I just spend a lot of time outside of my home, and on a long day, I will have left the house at 6 a.m. and I'll come back at 9. Just yeah, I work fairly far away from home, and I generally do taekwondo after, which I feel very shy mentioning because it's not something like I feel like when you mention something on social media or anything in the public, there's like I always want to protect myself from saying that because I'm not a black belt or anything, but I put a lot of time and energy and like laughter and devotion into that. So it just means that because I generally have that after work, I get home pretty late. Yeah. I most recently I was at a training yesterday, and I was with someone who was much better than I, and it's very uncomfortable doing that. It's something that I experience because I'm fairly new. I'm fairly new to this martial art, and it is just inherently humbling trying something that you are a beginner at, and because I'm trying so hard at it, it is just inherently very humbling. But I remember in the debrief, I was just thinking this thing of I think I said I am uncomfortable because you are better than me. But I'm getting better with sitting with that discomfort. I don't get frustrated at them. And what I tend to do more is I get frustrated at myself. But I think I'm better at just recognizing that I am uncomfortable and not trying to take that emotion anywhere. I'm just recognizing that I'm uncomfortable and think I'm getting better at that. Um, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Interesting. It's just interesting to think about. But hopping back to the Petal drop socks, the fourth pair that I cast on. I am, by the way, a monogamous knitter. I've just find that I finish a project that way, and that even if there's an area that I'm not looking forward to, so for example, the sleeves of the yellow cardigan, I will just get it done because I don't have anything else that I can work on. So I cast this on immediately after finishing my third pair of these socks, but I have decided to reprioritize to the yellow cardigan, so I'll be putting these down for a bit, just because I want to focus the majority of my attention and my efforts on that. I'll just show you why I like knitting these so much though, and it is very much in large part because of the portability. This takes up maybe like not even, this takes up a fifth of the space in my backpack. I don't have to carry around a separate bag for it, which is very nice. And what I also really love is it's small enough that I can knit without it being like too disruptive or obvious in meetings. It's so small that I can tuck into my hand and just very discreetly work on it. Whereas with the cardigan, I'd be spreading it over my lap. And with a colorwork piece, I would be working with like two balls of yarn. But this is pretty much what I've banged out in, I want to say maybe 3-4 hours. Um, Yeah, I meant to work on the Chiltern Socks by Midsummer Knits. I have purchased that pattern, but I cast this on during a meeting, and you have to cast on so many stitches to do the frill, and I twisted the stitches when I was working my way through, and I didn't quite have the willpower to try do that frill again. So I cast on a tried and true, which is I this pattern that I had by that point memorized. Uh, I think you cast on like 58 stitches or something, and then you have 29 on each needle. Um, and I didn't even need to look at the pattern. Yeah. I will knit those children's socks, but I will knit them, I think, not on these needles. I have a like a long needle that I loaned to a friend, and if I were to cast that many stitches on, I would use that long needle, and I would use magic loop until because by I think by the third round you do a knit two together every stitch to decrease that frill length drastically, and that kind of thing is just so much more manageable with a longer needle as opposed to these small things. You probably won't see these again for a while, just because I will be prioritizing that yellow cardigan, hopefully. And just my final little segment where I talk about books. Sorry, cup of tea, one sec. I am reading the final book of the 20-Man trilogy. It is Fool's Fate. I'm over the part that I was dreading, and it's always hard to talk about books because I don't want to give out spoilers, but I've read over the part that I really didn't want to get to, and I'm at a part where Fitz and the Fool are. It's for the first time, not for the first time. It's a very deep unraveling or enveloping of what the two are and how they are interlinked, and how in this case Fitz carries a fool, but through death, and I'm gonna have to put a spoiler note on this. And it's cyclical. It feels like a mirroring, as is most of this trilogy, of interactions or patterns of being that these characters have been through. So I think that Fitz takes on Barrick's son as Barrick did for him in that first trilogy when Fitz was a boy. And there's the same mirroring here where Fitz carries the Fool through death. And there's a part where it speaks to the wit, seeing the whole interconnectedness of the way of life. And there's a part that really struck, like stayed with me, was how in the Fool's body, when life has left, the interlinkings that hold the body together, that starts to come apart. So it's the moving of the body into death, into dirt, I think is how they say it. And Robin Hobb wrote it and in this death is also is another form of life. And so Fitz in the Fool's body, using the wit, using this way of seeing like the whole interlinking of life in the world, in the entirety of the world, sees that unraveling of the Fool's body as another form of life in itself. And of another aspect of this part of the book that I'm still thinking about and that I'm still resting on it is this idea of maybe lovers, or maybe you're like another half of you calling them by your name. And so for example, I'm still thinking about what it means for like it doesn't feel inaccurate to say your lover, but for Fitz and the Fool, like to call them by your name, it goes back. Do you remember in Wuthering Heights where I think Catherine says like I am Heathcliff? It's this idea, I think, of someone like the profound oneness with someone else, to the point where they are like intertwined and reflecting and corresponding to yourself in a way that for two to become one, or for that, yeah, I see. It's to be honest, you can see the same theme in the Locked Tomb of like Gideon the Ninth, for example, of the Cavalier and Necromancer duo. I think it's a concept that you see quite a bit in literature, and it feels particularly apt and fitting for the Fitz and the Fool, for the White Prophet and his Catalyst, because they are, for those two, they could not have done what they did without the other. They are intertwined and not intertwined. They are the corresponding parts of the story that they jolted or pushed or went into place. I think the way that the Fool speaks of it is that Fitz is like the rock or the pebble that jolts a cartwheel into place into a different path. So that speaking, that chapter where Fool, like the Fitz, carries the Fool and steps into his body and brings like that. I like calling them by each other's names. It feels very like it feels very true for those characters. And I've moved on to the final trilogy. So I believe the final one, the one that I will be starting now, is Fool's Assassin. It is in the trilogy The Fitz and the Fool. And the Fool has left the Fitz because he's worried in their interactions, because the Fitz and the Fool have brought about this conclusion that needed to be, and the Fool was saying to Fitz that if they continue to be together, they may change this future that ought to have been, so they parted ways. And in this final trilogy, I am looking forward to seeing the characters that I know come back. I feel certain that I will see Malta the Elderling again, and Selden Vestrit, another Elderling. The dragons will be there, and Fitz will be there, and the Fool will be there. And I look forward to seeing how all these characters who have been developed and how their stories in the past, all these past books, I look forward to seeing how they interact and how they come to be. And I think I will also feel the loss of these characters when I finish these books. You know the feeling when you finish a book or a film and you kind of feel a little bit desolate, and you feel that the world, like you feel a little bit out of touch with this world, because you were so involved in this other world. I felt like that after I finished the Gideon the Ninth, the books that they are, and I am like the rest of you guys within the Electo. What is it? The Electoverse, the Electopocalypse or something. The waiting for Electo the Ninth to come. But yeah, I know I will feel that when I finished this final trilogy. Yeah. I think that's about the limits. That's about what I wanted to say today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do leave me a comment. It means a great deal to me. And please like, subscribe, and comment. I think it's the whole list. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.